Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, presented by Cattle, Season 5, Episode 5. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm the Food Professor, Sylvain Charlebois.
Our special guest this week has taken a complicated start to his working life and reimagined breakfast. Andrew Andriano is the founder and CEO of Flourish.
Hey, you sound a bit different today, Michael. Where are you?
I am actually. I am in Dallas, Texas. I am at a Rev Tech Accelerator Summit, and I'm sitting in the Scratch Events DJ podcasting studio, which is right in the middle of the summit in a glass meeting room. So
and you can't scream. You can't be yourself.
I have to be a more modest version of myself.
That's right.
So that's why
So I'm going to win all arguments today. That's great.
That's why I sound a bit different. So just a temporary thing. I'm feeling fine and super enjoying being here in Texas. You know, it's interesting.
You sound like it's your Barry White voice today.
Well, who knows? Maybe the listeners would prefer this. So reach out and tell me if you like this kind of version. Listen, that's one session just ended. If you can hear some, like I said, I'm right. You know, here's the funny thing.
I heard some claps. Yeah, I thought it was because of what you said.
The owner of RevTech is a drummer, and he's sitting beside the stage and does the live drumming at the beginning and end of every session. Yes, just
wow.
A hoot. It's just a hoot. It's a real fun
Americans.
Group.
They got their ways.
Speaking of America, it's what's going on here. I mean, first of all, they're all very worried about this huge, massive storm coming up the coast, right? That's about to hit Miami. It was raining like I've never seen it rain in Dallas, and hail, crazy weather. The people are worried they're going to run out of bananas real soon because of these port strikes. And what struck me as interesting is it's not a nation, they grow so much of their own food. It's not a nation accustomed to running out of any food. You know what I mean? So it's
not a nation accustomed to strikes either.
So what's going on with you? We've got this great guest coming up on the show, and I think you were aware of Flourish, were you not? I was not aware of this. Oh,
absolutely. Yes, of course. And I actually went to, I tried to order some Flourish online, but the shipping fees were outrageous. So I actually went to a store, bought the product, tasted it with my girls, and they just loved it. They have a pumpkin. There you go. We bought the pumpkin one, and they just loved it. Yeah, and the mud cake, it works. It's great because my girls always make mud cakes here all the time, so they didn't have to do it. We just bought, and it was just delicious and nutritious too. Because we'll hear from Andrew, but the focus of his products is health.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a great. I did not know the product. I did not know Andrew, but it was a real treat to meet him, and you will all enjoy listening to him. The other thing that is news here is the price of eggs, and the avian flu is, I don't know if it's back or if it's never went away. I was looking at some numbers. Get this, up in Minnesota, 137%, Missouri, 123%. So it's really problematic, and we've covered it on the pod before, how our particular
in the spring it was dairy, and then basically it got back to flocks of birds. Unfortunately, they're being hard hit by the avian flu, and of course it's making a lot of people in Canada very nervous. It hasn't hit us yet, but we are expecting a new wave for sure, and that could impact prices. But it never impacts prices here as much as prices are impacted in the U.S.
Right, because of the managed supply.
Well, supply management, biosecurity standards are a little bit different. So there are safety nets in Canada that really helps our poultry and egg sector as well. And when you see the avian flu hit industry, typically you would see more price volatility with chicken and turkey, not necessarily eggs in Canada. You do see prices change just because of the numbers and the time to recover. Chicken will lay eggs every day, so it's so intensive you can actually recover your cost very quickly. But when you lose birds, And you can't.
That's 45 days, right? Isn't it 45 days for chick to a full bird, right?
So that's why it takes a bit longer. And typically you would see, and in Canada, you would notice that prices from one province to another do vary because of the avian flu and the cost that's related to some of these siege crises. So that's really unfortunate. Like BC, for example, the BC has been hard hit by the avian flu over the years, and costs are much higher in BC than elsewhere in Canada.
I didn't realize. Let's get to the news. So we've mentioned it a couple of times, labor disruptions. We mentioned it a couple of times, labor disruptions affecting the food supply. There seems to be a lot going on. Like here, I'm going to say here, but here they're really worried about this longshoreman strike at U.S. ports. As I said, it could cut off the supply of bananas. And they're like, this is making big news. But in Canada, of course, back home, you've got the Vancouver grain terminal workers strike, and you've got Montreal potentially going on strike. What's going on?
Well, I mean, it's basically, I think it's the product of inflation. With inflation, the cost of living has gone up, and employees are expecting to actually see their wages go up, and so that's why they're going back. Like, it will vary from one case to another. Issues will vary, of course. Sometimes safety at work is mentioned, and benefits as well. But generally speaking, when you see inflation go up, you do see a slew of labor disputes down the road, and that's kind of what's going on right now. What's unfortunate is that these unions are really have become quite strategic. The Port of Montreal vote is absolutely critical, because if the port shuts down and you're an exporter, guess what? Typically what you would do is go south.
Right.
But if your option down south is on strike, so the entire eastern part of North America could actually be paralyzed as a result of what's going on right now between the Port of Montreal and the situation in the U.S. as well. So that's that's quite problematic. And of course, in Canada, our reputation is being impacted by a series of strikes, and Americans thought, well, we're immune to labor disputes. Well, not anymore. As of October 1st, we may actually see a different America, unfortunately. So Americans are not used to this. They are expecting things to settle, say, probably at the end of September. In Canada, what we're accustomed to now is to see Ottawa just wait until the strike starts or the labor stoppage starts, and then they actually intervene. So that's kind of what we're expecting with Vancouver right now. And if it does happen in Montreal, we're expecting the same thing.
Well, they didn't intervene in the Air Canada dispute, though. Arguably, it never got to that point. They put forward a resolution.
But it's mostly about people. It's most of it. So logistically, stakes are a bit different. Air Canada will actually basically Air Canada's cargo is probably about $1 billion a year. So it's a lot, but it's not critical. It's like lobsters to China. I mean, it's not that critical. Railways, you're talking about a lot of volume.
That's critical.
And a terminal in BC, it's a lot of volume too. I mean, Canada is the third largest exporter of wheat in the world. Almost 70 to 80% of all the wheat that we export goes through those terminals. And 20% of all calories consumed on Earth is wheat.
Man,
so it's a problem.
Wow. Say that statistic again.
20% of all calories consumed on Earth is wheat.
That's crazy.
Now we're number three exporter in the world. Number one is Russia, two is Europe, and three is Canada.
All right. We get our case of vodka.
And a lot of it goes to Asia.
And we get our case of vodka. Thank you for mentioning Russia again. Inside joke from last episode. Let's talk about this bill C-293. I think most Canadians, I have no idea what this is until I read the article. So. What is going on?
Seriously, I couldn't believe. So it went through Parliament like butter. It was presented back in 2022. There were some delays, but 3 readings, it passed, and now it's in Senate, and people are starting to talk about it. Essentially, this Bill 293, is about pandemic preparedness.
That sounds like a good idea, right? Okay.
Of course it is a good idea, but the thing about this bill is that it actually brings in a lot of different things. Okay, let's talk about health. Let's talk about the environment. Let's talk about the economy. They put everything into one. The One Health approach, advocated by the UN quite a bit these days. So if you want to keep your people healthy, you got to be more prescriptive. For example, when you actually read the text, and I actually posted that on X, people couldn't believe it. I mean, it's basically suggesting that we need to de-risk the food supply chain and focus more on sectors that are less risky. So it specifically labels animal production as high risk. And in the bill, verbatim, it says that we need to encourage Canadians to eat alternative proteins and reduce our capacity to produce animal proteins.
How did this get through? I don't understand. It's in reading in the Senate. How did this get through without any kind of...
So I was speaking with Senator Pamela Wallin yesterday, and because she's stuck with this hot potato, and a lot of senators are going, what is going on here? The private bill, it's a private bill. On top of that, private bills tend to get killed during the first reading.
They tend to get strangled in the crib, right? They don't really make it out anywhere.
Exactly. And so this particular Liberal MP, he ran for the Ontario Liberal leadership. His name escapes me, but he's a vegan. And of course, you can actually, as you read the bill, it's confusing because they bring in a lot of stuff like the environment and health and economy and other stuff. And then, of course, at some point, you kind of get it when you say, well, listen, this is really about picking winners and losers when it comes to the agri-food sector. And frankly, it's an incredible overreach. So preparing for a pandemic is absolutely critical, but this bill could give public health officials a lot of power to do a lot more than what we saw back in 2020.
And as I understood it, that's even before there's a pandemic. This is preparing for a potential pandemic.
Exactly.
Do I have that right?
Yes. And so I wrote an op-ed, and of course I've been getting some calls about my reaction, and frankly, I just can't believe this is happening in Canada. I mean, this is just insane.
Now, the good news is you were talking to one of the senators. We know other senators. The Senate can stop these bills or just make amendments that just slow it down and basically run the clock out till the next election, which is probably next year.
Yeah,
right?
but independents are the majority at Senate. But let's be honest here, Michael. Independents are liberal. So that's why a lot of people are saying this is actually going to go through. I know, like Senator Rod Black, who's been on our show before, Mary Robinson, the former CFA president, Senator Pamela Wallin, they're all scratching their heads. What are we going to do with this? But they're outnumbered, Michael. They're outnumbered. This is likely going to go through, and that's why a lot of advocates are asking people to write Senate.
Well, the good news is, I guess, it's a vote loser, I think, for most. So I think it's just a little. You've put some sunshine on this issue, so I bet you some stuff's going to happen. That would be my prediction. Maybe
I'm not.
Maybe
done.
we need a senator on the Colbert show or something.
It's just the media is so focused on Parliament right now and the vote of confidence, and they're not paying attention to other issues. And so I'm quite surprised that we haven't talked about this before now.
No kidding. Why don't we get you on the Stephen Colbert show? Apparently, that's an option for people in Canada.
We should,
these
as
days.
long as he doesn't call me the Canada's Trump or. Yeah, Canada's Ralph Nader.
There you go. Yeah, that would be equally, equally insulting or equally.
I don't know. Like, I feel bad because a lot of people in the industry, when they feel voiceless, they call me, and when they call me, I feel that I need to do something because I'm tenured, I'm protected. They're not, so I got to do something. Sorry, Michael.
All right.
But I don't think it'll get threats for this one. I think we should be fine.
I don't know. Those vegans can be pretty ornery sometimes. They see a win here. Let's change gears a little bit. Let's talk about restaurants, food service. You wrote an op-ed that I thought was interesting because you brought in the trifecta basically of food you buy at retail. There's food at food service at restaurants, and then there's food banks. We talked about the enormous, unfortunately, amount of Ontarians that are going to the food banks. How are you thinking about the changing dynamics between restaurants, food bought at retail, and I guess where does the food bank consumption play into your understanding of how big this market is?
Yeah, no, absolutely. As you know, I love to analyze data. I love to understand what's going on using data. And so a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the fact that people are spending less at the grocery store. We've talked about this many times. And the trend is starting to reverse now. We're starting to see that number go up again, which is great. We actually tanked. So we bottomed in May of 2024. So our record low, $246 per Canadian was in May, and now we're starting to see that number go up. But on the food service side, Michael, food service, we're spending more. Our historical high. So if you look at the amount of money Canadians spend on average at the grocery store, in restaurants, it's over $180. And our record, the highest level we've ever been, was in December 2023. So December is a big month, of course. And but it's maintaining at around 185, 186. And the other thing that I thought was interesting is that 43% of our budget actually goes to food consumed outside the home. And in a few weeks from now, we'll be in Toronto at the Coffee Association conference, and I'm going to tell them. I mean, this is really good news for them. Consumption outside the home is really good news for them, and that's so. I don't know. Were you surprised by the data, Michael?
Very much.
We seem to be getting closer to the American market, where it is very service oriented.
I was surprised, and I guess I put myself in one of these. I don't live like that, so it's hard for me to imagine spending 43% outside the home. But there are 6 meal occasions, right? If you do 6 times 7, there's a lot of occasions. But and I guess people are going back to work more in the workplace versus work at home. And what do you think has
gone up?
How much of this average is created by inflation and prices that have gone up in restaurants? Or
there are factors like inflation is part of it, and I don't know what the coefficient is. Tipflation is part of it. I don't know what the coefficient is there because people are leaving more tips. But I must say I'm actually quite pleased with the results. The other thing that I'm thinking about, Michael, just to go back to our conversation about food security and 1 million people going to food banks in Ontario and all that stuff, I actually do think that we are seeing the slow collapse of the middle class, really. So you got the people not affected by inflation doing very well, and they are spending at restaurants. Businesses are spending at the restaurant. And on the other side, you got a ton of people struggling. And so I think that what's happening, between food service and retail per capita is that you are seeing evidence of a collapsing middle class as far as I'm concerned. And because the GDP per capita is also just dropping, it's declining. So we're getting poorer even though we have more people in the country. So there's less wealth. How can you possibly spend more to go at the restaurant when there's less wealth in the system? It's the only explanation I can come up with.
Let's take a break from the news and we'll get to our interview and understand this great product, Flourish. But before that, let's hear from our great sponsor, Cattle. Ever feel like the world of ratings and reviews needed a superhero? Well, enter Cattle, the caped crusader with Canada's largest, most diverse, and daily active consumer panels. That's right, Cattle is not your average podcast sponsor. They're like that cool friend who always knows the hottest trends. I mean, they are the voice of the consumer, after all. So why choose Cattle? Because Cattle excels in consumer insights from your consumer while also blazing trails in the realm of ratings and reviews, pioneering the future landscape of user-generated content. Beyond valuable syndicated receipt data, they stand as unparalleled collector of reviews at scale, irrespective of category or price point. A testament to their impact, partnerships with giants like Walmart, Canadian Tire, and more. Visit askcattle.com now for an exclusive The Food Professor podcast listener discount on your first review or research campaign today. That's askcattle.com.
All right, Andrew, welcome to the Food Professor podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually watched many of your interviews on YouTube. You do give a lot of interviews, and a lot of interviews are about you as an entrepreneur. Fascinating story. So for our audience, tell us more about yourself, your job, what you've done, what you're doing now, and perhaps some of our entrepreneurs out there would be inspired by your story.
Yeah, so I'm Andriano. I'm the founder of Flourish. Started Flourish 6 years ago. Before getting into the world of CPG, I was a e-commerce entrepreneur. So proudly have been working for myself since, I guess, about 19, 20 years old. I'm 29 now, and I already feel like it's been way too long. But, starting Flourish is one of the best things that ever happened to me. I feel like, to give you the short and sweet, we're a low sugar, high protein breakfast food company. We've grown to build the second largest pancake mix brand in Canada. In doing that, we've positively impacted so many people's lives with better nutrition and definitely my life as well. We can kind of get into all of that, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Could you give us some metrics in terms of how big is Flourish, just so audience know exactly what we're talking about here?
Yeah, it's an 8-figure revenue company, and we're growing at about 50% a year. The Canadian pancake mix market is definitely not as big as the US pancake mix market, so we have a ton of room to grow in the States. There's probably about another $100 to $200 million in sales we can capture in the US annually.
Could you give us more information about your products, so what you're selling right now?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we're a low sugar, high protein breakfast food company. We have a few different lines. So one kind of our hero product is our whole grain whey-based line. So claim to fame for that is 23 grams of protein per serving, 7 grams of fiber, and no added sugar. That is really, like I said, the hero product. So the buttermilk product in that line is about 60% of our revenue. We also have a bunch of other really cool flavors like blueberry, apple cinnamon, vanilla, chocolate, birthday cake, anything you can think of. We're even doing pumpkin spice right now, which is a lot of fun. Yeah, you could sell pumpkin spice anything in August and September. Right? It's like they got you go into home sense. There's like pumpkin spice pencils and doorknobs and stuff. So people go crazy for pumpkin spice.
But you know what? It's fun. We jest and we kind of mock, but it works. I was looking at some numbers. Starbucks traffic is up double digits. So it works. It drives traffic and people like it.
Yeah, it's huge for us too. So that'll do like a month's worth. Or a few months worth of, let's say, like our second or third best SKU, like vanilla would do across the country just online is pumpkin spice, right? So the launch is massive. Like people wait for it, and then it sells out, and we got to bring it back. It's nuts. So pumpkin spice is a good one. Then we do gingerbread. But to kind of get back to it, what our product really does for people in our category is it's the highest amount of protein. So when you're looking to actually hit your macros and you're shopping through the pancake mix category, Flourish is one of the only options, I would say, that actually helps you meet those goals. And that's a lot different than anything else in the category. It's very indulgent, kind of like boring, not a lot of innovation, not a lot of flavor innovation in the category. So we've really filled a void with that. And that was something that I tried to identify early on. And then we also have a plant-based gluten-free, non-GMO line, and our newest innovation is our mug cakes. So it's a serving of Flourish, pop it in the microwave, and kind of take it to go, pack it in your kid's lunch. That's something that we're just sort of spinning up right now. It's been a pretty successful launch, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah, my guess it's going to be really popular with the kids. We have 3 teenage girls here in our house, and that's what they do. So if you can give them a quick solution, they're all for it. So that's a good idea. Anyways, from my perspective, I know a bit about your background. I know that your father is an entrepreneur, but he's in construction, and that's a field you weren't interested in, and you went out on your own. But as you became an entrepreneur, you were homeless for a while. So tell us more about, that experience and how it shaped you as a founder.
Yeah, it sounds like a sad story when you hear it back, but it's actually one that's very happy. I think it was a very important part of my life, right? Like I was sort of groomed to grow up in the family business. I make a joke like these hands don't hold shovels, they get manicures, right? So
Yeah.
Construction wasn't for me, right? And that was tough trying to leave that, especially when it's something that you've thought about your whole life. Even if I was like 18 or 19 at the time, you're barely developed. But I ended up living in a homeless shelter for about a year. And then I started my first business, basically transitioning out of the shelter and onto living with my friends on their couches in their dorms. So I lived at University of Guelph for a little bit. I lived at Queen's University for a little bit. I even took some courses. Just basically starting my businesses and trying to get myself back on my feet. And I think to kind of put a bow on this, like what was so special for me is it really pushed me to have to kind of look in the mirror and say, what do I want to do, right? Do I want to rely on somebody for the rest of my life and kind of like go back home, let's say, and be under someone's thumb? Or do I want to just get a job and see what happens, or try to build something for myself? And I chose to at least try to build something for myself. Thankfully, I've had a lot of really good luck over the last few years and got myself out of that situation and then started Flourish, right? And I think I would have ended up much wealthier than I am now, but I would have been probably a spoiled brat with none of the experiences that I have today, right? Like I get to do things like this, like the people that I meet in my career now is just so incredible. So I'm so blessed to be working on this and developing, other young people around me as they join my team and learning from board members. So like I said, it sounds like a sad story, but it actually ends up being very, very happy. So I'm super blessed for that.
Can I ask you? I want to pull on a thread about that because Malcolm Gladwell has famously talked about a little bit of adversity in our lives is actually helpful for development. But you certainly had adversity, but for many they don't have adversity. So I don't want to say you need to create it, but how do you kind of instill or inculcate, even in your team members, the same kind of stick to itness and the lessons you learned from your period of adversity? How do you inculcate that into the corporate culture?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think personally and from a management perspective, it's very different. But what I would say for starters is one of the reasons that I do tell my story is that because when I tell it, I find out that a lot of people have gone through something similar or know someone similar. And it may not be homelessness. It might be moving to a different country. It might be a disease or a death, God forbid, or something that has impacted them. And a lot of people go through a lot of pain, right? So I think one, being open and honest about it really breaks down a lot of barriers and kind of helps build that trust with people so that when I do ask them to do something, let's say someone on my team or someone in my life, they know that it's coming from a place of I've done it before and I've been through it. Mm-hmm. And then from a management perspective, it's very imperative that you set clear goals with people and make them stick to it and not try, you want to celebrate the wins and all that good stuff, but not necessarily reward the mediocrity that everyone kind of puts forward at some point. Like I'm mediocre probably almost every single day, right? So it's natural and it happens. And I think there's this tendency for people to just accept it and make things easy for people and sort of move on. But it's okay to make it hard for them if you do it with empathy and emotion. And that's actually one of the traits in our company culture. One is act like an owner, right? We have a long company culture, but one of them is act like an owner. And the other one that goes hand in hand is leave the room happier, right? And the two interesting things about that is like, even if you're negotiating with somebody or you're delivering them terrible news, at the end of the call, they should feel like their day got better by speaking with you. I think that's sort of some of the ways we try to include it in management, but I can't tell people like, hey, if you want to work here, you got to go spend a year in a shelter or something. Right. And I guess to kind of wrap on that, a lot of it is you can look for it a lot, right? Like a lot of it is found, and a lot of the people in my company have been through a lot. Like one of the hardest working people that I know is my CFO and business partner now, Jensen. he was a refugee. He had like a life that nobody would want to live back home, and came here and really just like made something of himself. So yeah, Malcolm Gladwell has a point.
All right. Let's get back to Flourish. So you kind of, I'm very curious about the inspiration that gave rise to Flourish. You see what I did there? Rise to Flourish. But of all the things, you could have done, you said, I'm going to not put words in your mouth, but basically you found some white space in a particular category in the grocery store, and you said, hey, there's an opportunity here, but when you said, I'm going to do something, and it's not construction, pancakes is not the first thing that comes to my mind, right? Yeah. like how did you get there? And
fair enough.
How did talk about that?
Yeah. So like I said, I was running e-commerce businesses in between sort of the family business and when I started Flourish. I really first tried to discover like what my actual skill was and how could I scale it. So when I was younger, I hope it still is today, but my skill then was sales. And the way to scale it for me was by selling to people online, right? And at the time, I was able to identify both of those things, and there was also a bit of a tailwind. So you always need luck, and you always need the market moving in the right direction. But there was the rise of drop shipping, right? So if anyone remembers back then, drop shipping was a big deal. You could find a product on AliExpress and, turn on a store and make $1 million overnight. It wasn't as nice as it sounded, but there was opportunity. So I started getting into that. I actually started over the 4 years, 24 different e-commerce stores. And I had turned it into a bit of a lab. So people would come to me and say, hey, I have an idea for, one of my best performing stores was a cat litter scooper. I have an idea for a cat litter scooper. We called it Perfect Kitty. Speaking of puns, Purr. Anyways. And, I would work with people to start stores, and I would mentor them and all these things. So I was able to scale really quickly. And then the reason I identified pancake mixes is because I was honestly tired of drop shipping. It's not a sustainable business model. Things start and they work, and then bad reviews come in, or stuff ships late and then they die. And there's no amount of marketing that can put a Band-Aid over a crappy brand, right? And when you're drop shipping, you're generally selling crappy brands. So
or the drop shippers, brand. Or the drop shippers now go direct, right? They've gone past that business model, and the China direct model is kind of usurped that. It's interesting as you describe it. It's very much like the evolution of the as seen on TV products, right? It's a modern kind of take on that.
Basically, yeah, right. And now you have Amazon, and all these things have changed, right? So having a strong brand, I think, was one part of it, and then the other was like having a product that I could control the actual quality of. And it's a funny story. So someone came to my house one day to learn how to start an e-commerce store. And this guy brought like these really disgusting looking homemade chickpea cookies. And he was a workout and fitness guy. And I was just like looking at him like I was eating Tim Hortons and Starbucks. And like, it didn't matter what it was. If there was sugar in it, like put it in front of me, it's gone. And I was looking at these things like, ew, man, like you made these, like, let alone you've got to buy something like this from the store. You actually put time into this and bring it to my house, right? And then a light bulb went off, and I lived in like a tiny little bungalow with like mice in it and like King City. It was all I could afford at the time. But I actually ran and I called my brother. My brother's a chef. And at the time I hadn't spoken to my brother probably in like 3 or 4 years. And I said, as soon as he picked up, I said, Peter, there are some weird people out here. They are eating healthy. They're bringing these gross chickpea cookies to my house. Like, if we can make something that's easy for a normal person to make and taste great, people will buy it, right? Yeah. And I love bagel waffles. So,
and he said,
"Where the fuck are you right now?"
Yeah,
Sorry,
right.
I just swore. But he said, "Like, who is this?" Right? No, I'm kidding. So we actually started working on that together. He made me the recipe, and then we quit on the frozen waffles. It was too hard, and Flourish was born.
Very hard.
And then the whole like e-com to omni-channel thing, and now a few years later, we're the fastest growing CPG company in Canada and second largest in market share.
Listen, before I hand the mic back to Savannah to kind of bring us home, listen, we talk to a lot of people, not quite like yourself, but a lot of great entrepreneurs who come up with a product and they find a little bit of white space in a market. And some are, there's a wide spectrum of success. Let's just put it that way. What is it? You've got you found a product, you found a kind of category niche, but it takes more than that. I mean, you've got listings, you've got a whole bunch of things going on. One or two things, just if you could share one or two things, because I know that the fellow entrepreneurs listening go like, okay, how did he crack that code to, that's a big deal, right? Fastest growing CPG company. That is a big, big deal. So what are the kind of one or two things that have led to that success that you can share and in the context of some advice?
Yeah, I think first off, humbly, I'm a pedal to the metal type of person. And I think, before a lot of people crack the code cracks them. So I just was in a position where it was all on the line, and I try to maintain that mentality as much as I can. Right. And I just don't take no for an answer. And even 6 years in, grocery specifically is a very antiquated, slow industry that's run by giants that they just do the exact same thing year over year and grow 3%, right? And I'm still walking into meetings and having buyers say to me, we've never done something like that, or we don't allow promotions during this time because of XYZ. And I ask for it anyways. So I think not taking no for an answer and really trying to, push, they have that saying like put a square peg in a round hole, right? You just push until the hole turns square. So that's one of the things I say to my team a lot. And the other is having just really great people around to actually bounce ideas off of has honestly put me in a position to succeed, right? Because when I started, I didn't know what a grocery store was. Like I completely dove into an industry that I had no idea how to navigate. And because of Arlene Dickinson investing and, a bunch of the people that I met early on really sort of set me on the right path. So mentorship, in short, is a big part of the game as well.
Health is clearly an important part of your brand. Convenience as well. You got lots of different flavors. Your website is very exciting. What's next? What are your future goals for the brand in general?
I believe that we're sitting on a $100 million a year business in the next 3 years. So that is our revenue goal. Our mission is really to continue building out the breakfast platform and delivering on that promise of low sugar, high protein foods that fuel. And how we're going to do both of those things, the strategy behind it is, pushing to build distribution in the States, which is very, very hard. It's one of the things we've got to get down. And the other is building our innovation platform, more so focused in Canada, right? So now that we've actually built a sustainable distribution system here and a strong brand, what else can we deliver to people, right? To fulfill that breakfast vision? Is it syrup, frozen waffles, cereal, maybe? We're taking feedback. We have a comment box, so reach out and let us know what you think for sure. But those are the next two goals for us over the next 3 years that are going to help us become a $100 million a year business.
That's great. Congratulations. I mean, it's just your story is so wonderful. And I will commit to ordering some products for sure.
Made a sale.
Because I have a pretty nice focus group here at home. they'll test it for sure.
Fantastic. There you go. Just always be there. You go. Just do more podcast interviews, one at a time, right? One customer.
As long as I get the host, as long as the host buy.
That's right.
Fantastic. Well, Andrew, listen, it's such a great story. It's both inspiring and educational. And like I said, we talked to a lot of entrepreneurs similar to yourself with product, and they see opportunity and lots of lessons to learn. And we'll be watching closely. So thanks so much for joining us on the Food Professor podcast. It's real great to meet you, and I look forward to, as I said, seeing the business grow and trying it myself and doing all those great things.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Best of luck to you, Andrew. All
right, so let's talk. Let's stay in the grocery aisles. Body cameras at Loblaws. So body cams. I mean, this is a story that's coming out, and we're seeing
You're a
in the
retail
industry.
guy. Are you surprised?
No, we're seeing it everywhere, and it's evidentiary. Gathering evidence, really, right? Organized crime, like body cams are not really seen as a deterrent. I would say, if I would summarize the approach, it's seen as evidence, gathering evidence for the crime. So you would see body cameras on typically loss prevention people and store managers with their interaction with
an argument
people.
I'm also hearing is that grocers are doing that to monitor employees as well.
I don't think much about that. I mean, we underestimate if you're running a retail store today and you have theft in the store, there's one thing, you're going to lose a bit of money. It's the violence perpetrated against the customers. You read some of the stories coming out of Vancouver, the big theft rings here in the GTA. I mean, these are violent, organized crimes. They're trying to, the more that they can, I guess, put a broad-based deterrent as in, we're going to, until the justice system releases them, because they keep releasing them, it's a catch and release. You have the same criminals coming into stores 2-3 times a day. So, the body cameras.
The irony is that you have police forces out there in Canada refusing to wear body cams, but you now have grocery clerks wearing.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's grocery
cams.
Clerks now. I think we're talking loss prevention professionals versus your person who's
Loblaw sent me a
brochures.
statement to clarify, and I encourage people to go on X to see the Loblaw's clarification. It's not all employees that will actually be using cams, and cams will not always be on as well. Yeah. So there are really specific things that we need to keep. So if people actually think it's Big Brother and we're watching everyone, it's not the case. No. And it is a pilot only in Saskatchewan and Alberta for now.
Mm-hmm. All right, listen, so let's leave it there. And so a reminder to everybody, we'll be in November at the Canadian Coffee Association Conference. And if you're in the industry, you should join us because it's a great show. There'll be lots of great speakers. I think Arlene Dickinson's there, and our friend Benjamin Towell. We're going to get him on the mic as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So it'll be a great event.
You
so
just
if you're
confirmed as well. So
yeah, if you're going to be in the Toronto area, get your tickets, and it'll be great. And we'll see you there. And you'll be on stage as well. You and Tony Chapman, right? Tony will be interviewing live on stage.
Looking forward to see Tony again and the folks at. It's going to be a different venue. I actually was. I mean, that venue we had at the Globe and Mail Tower, it was pretty good.
Beautiful.
It was pretty nice.
Small. Beautiful, but small.
Small,
and they've outgrown
nice.
it. Lots of interest in the coffee business. So congratulations to the folks there. All right, well, let's leave it there. I'm Michael Obama, media entrepreneur, advisor, and I have another podcast, and I'm now in a glass room, and that's why I sounded different, just as a reminder to everybody. But we'll be back to normal next week. I'll be back home in Toronto. So until then, safe travels, everybody.
Take care.